What's up, guys? This is Anthony, and today we are going to be talking about Heroine Anthem Zero Episode 1. I don't know how many parts there are in this series, but this is the first one, and we're going to talk about it in order of story, then audio-visual, then gameplay. The story. The story, I feel, is the weakest part of this game for two reasons. One, the characters in the scenarios aren't very interesting. This is pretty much a story of humans and the Fae coexisting and protecting the forest and destiny, blah 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 blah. It's very long-winded and it doesn't really seem to say a lot, which would be fine if the characters were really compelling and well fleshed out. But a lot of the characters really just seem to fall into one or two main personality traits. The main character, Wanim, he's just a hothead. He goes and rushes into any situation and thinks, I can fight it. And that's his character. That is his character. His fairy companion, she's careful and foul-mouthed. That's her character. Your captain, he's duty bound and law bound, but he also seems to be a terrible husband. It's really just, you can boil every character down to one or two traits, and there's the character. And that does not make a good story. And I wish it was, because for something like that, only to have so much to say, I wish I was, I guess, more compelled to listen to it all. I won't say it doesn't help that it's not in English voice acting, because I don't know if the voice acting would have been great. But the Japanese voice acting is serviceable for people who like Japanese voiceovers. It doesn't bother me either way. But I really wish that the story was stronger, or that the characters were better. Moving on from that, audio-visual. They're great. Everything about that is great. Looking at it is amazing. The watercolor technique that they use to paint this game, I really have a thing for watercolors in games like Olden Sphere or Dragon's Crown. That art style is probably one of my favorite art styles in video games today. I love the way it looks. It's I don't want to say breathtaking, but it's amazing. I am by no means an art major or anything like that, so I can't tell you things like the colors were so deep and all that stuff, but I know a good game when I see one, and this is a great looking game. Even if the art style does make the animations look a little jank, but it's hardly noticeable when you're playing the game, which we will get to in a moment. As far as the music, I want to say that it's atmospheric. There were times where I didn't really notice the music, but that kind of feels like that was the point. It isn't an intrusive soundtrack. It just sets the mood to where it needs to be. Tense moments sound tense. Calmer moments sound calmer. It's a good soundtrack. I don't think it's a soundtrack you can listen to outside the context of a game, but it's a good soundtrack nonetheless. It does its job of making sure that you understand what kind of tone the game wants to set in certain moments. Now, as far as the gameplay, at first, maybe the first half hour to hour or so, depending on how much you breeze through it, which you probably shouldn't do, because this is a game where it's a bunch of hidden collectibles and things like, well, not collectibles, but equipment and things like that. But in the first hour or so, it's a little repetitive and boring. It doesn't really ramp up until you start getting new skills, new weapon upgrades, and things like that. Then, when you're using moves, you can summon a hurricane or bring meteors. Well, not meteors, I'm not really sure what to call them. But you can bring down fire. All sorts of things like that. That's when the game starts to really get good, as you get more skills, more abilities, and things like that, as most action RPGs tend to do. You can buy things from shops. You can buy healing items. You can buy upgrades. Beating bosses usually gives you a new technique like double jump, or I'm gonna call it the Hurricane Upper. I forgot what they actually call it, but I'm calling it the Hurricane Upper because that move is amazing. And it really gives you a good sense of progression as you go through the game. Where you start off as a guy who just kind of blindly swings a sword, to now you're swinging your sword and you get this really cool after effect and you're summoning hurricanes. Yes, I'm talking about the hurricanes a lot because that is my favorite move in this game. If you give me a game where I'm a sword fighter who can summon hurricanes, I'm probably going to love the gameplay. My only gripe with it, however, is how much it's interrupted by the story, which, as I've discussed earlier, is not that interesting. I really am bothered by how much they cut off the best part, which is playing the game with exposition. That is usually some, dialogue with a quip here or there, or some talk about camaraderie, or introducing another uninteresting character. Let me play. Let me do the best parts. Come on. And that was my biggest gripe with the game, that it just kept interrupting me. And it was a bit of a slog. But as much as I say that, this isn't an incredibly long game. I want to say I beat it taking my time, maybe 8 hours, 8 or 9. And that's taking my time, making sure I got everything. This is not that long of a game. And I'll admit, I did kind of breeze through a little bit of the story because a lot of it is fluff. It's conversations that are supposed to be funny, but sometimes aren't. But other than the story getting in the way more often than it should, would I recommend it? If you like scrolling action RPGs, I would. I don't hate this game. I just hate how intrusive it can be. And though that is the case, it does make me interested in what happens in the future. The story, with what little I cared about, particularly the ending, which I won't spoil, makes me really wonder what's ahead. I want to play episode 2, if only because the best part of the story was the ending. And I don't mean because it ended, I mean maybe the last hour of the game was the best part of the game. So, for that, I would recommend it. No, I'm not saying I would recommend it for an hour worth of game, but maybe you'll find the story more interesting than I would. It is carried by the gameplay, which I think is pretty solid, and for that, I would say, give it a try. Give it about maybe at the $15 mark. I don't know how much this retails for at the moment, but if you can snag it for about $10, I'd say go ahead and go for it. Alright, that's my take. If you guys have played it, let me know what you all think, and I will talk to you all later.